Thank you very much, Mike. But just before I open the floor up for questions, I see Dr. Unger's also in the audience, so I'd just like to extend an invitation to her if she wants to contribute to any of the answers to the questions.
Just raise your hand, Beth, so they'll know who you are. This is Dr. Elizabeth Unger. She's the acting branch chief. Dr. Unger is a pathologist, internationally known microbiologist, particularly skilled also in HPV and in a number of other areas, and we're thrilled to have her here today. Sitting with her is Dr. Kim Hummel, who is one of our policy experts and a laboratorian in the division where the CFS group is housed, and so they can help me answer any questions that CFSAC might have for us at this time.
Dr. Jason.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for kind of making that data set available, or will be very soon. That really is very much in the spirit of other things that you have done for this committee concerning financial matters when we requested information, which you were very kind of forthcoming, and that really was very much appreciated by the committee members. I've got a couple of specific questions. The first really brings it back to the Science Day, where you saw, again, a number of presentations by several different people, some of whom are here. And I'm just kind of wondering if you can tell us any implications that you might have seen from stuff that was presented versus the things that might be going out the CDC, and also the standards. Do you feel that the CDC has the same types of standards that was presented there, and whether you feel the CDC is playing that leadership role that, of course, would be important? And the second question has to do with the case definition consensus meeting. I'm really happy that you're going to consider doing that with the CDC. I'm just kind of wondering, for the registry and for some of the recent publications, are you continuing to use the operationalization of the Fukuda criteria using the 2005 Reeves criteria, so-called? Is that still being used with these most recent publications? And if you have any kind of considerations to our group about the use of that, since it's the Reeves 2005 criteria continue to be a little bit controversial. And the third issue really has to do with the ICD-10. And my most recent looking at the criteria, which it sounds like the CDC possibly is doing some work with, I did not see either CFS or myalgic encephalomyelitis in most recent drafts anywhere within those frameworks. I'm wondering if you might comment on those three issues.
You're not asking a program person, you're asking an agency rep, okay? And so, Beth, you may need to help me here in just a minute. Get to maybe at the table up here at the front. Yeah, right up here. I think we'll have those available. The first question had to do with the standards. What? I'm not sure what you're asking about standards. Do we have standards? Of course we do.
I guess
going to have to clarify that.
Sure, I'll try. It may be Beth, as you said, is probably the more appropriate person. You know, certainly, Beth, you saw kind of a number of investigators at the Science Day. I'm wondering if any of the type work that you saw being talked about has any relevance for the CDC program, and in terms of just the overall quality of the work, how do you think it fits with the types of quality of the work that's occurring at the CDC? And if you could just maybe talk about the comparison of those types of things, that will help our committee.
Well, CDC's program is science-based, so of course Science Day was absolutely, completely relevant. And the talks were all very good and will, you know, be incorporated into our program. In particular, I guess it was easiest for me to immediately identify with the gene expression, genomics part of it. And it's very interesting, some of the findings that people are having in common as well as some differences. And so, yes, we will definitely keep all of these things in mind. The whole question of the heterogeneity of the illness, I think, was so clearly presented at the meeting. And that is something that our group and everybody, I think, dealing with this illness is starting to appreciate and needs to come up with better ways, which does segue into the case definition issue, if I could just go ahead and come to that. And one reason we didn't have a meeting yet is that we need to put into print and make available to the world what exactly we are doing with our data and our classification, because there has been a lot of misunderstanding. We are abiding by the 1994 case definition. Now, I think that it doesn't serve anybody to be a slave to any one definition. And what is more important than any definition is trying to come up with the optimal ways to give a full dimension to the spectrum of illness that are included in the people that you're studying. And so, as Dr. Miller mentioned, one of the very first pieces of information that we're pulling out of the Georgia follow-up surveillance, is an actual sort of 2-by-2 matrix, a comparison of how we would have classified them if we had done it the way that we did in Wichita versus the way we're doing it with the instruments. And so it's really only a difference in the way we apply the 1994 case definition. And I think that will go a long way to explaining the nature of, who fits one way versus the other way. And indeed, we have taken very seriously and read very carefully all of the very important criticisms and concerns that were raised by many in the committee and many other scientists about how we're using this case definition, and want to be sure that everybody is clear on what we're doing. And there could be, indeed, better ways to apply the instruments, but I think everybody would like to have as much precision and reproducibility as possible in the classification. But I think, again, the day of a simple CFS versus control situation is probably over, and we need to have CFS with a dimensionality in, be it fatigue, be it their cognition, be it sleep. There's many, many different domains, and I think that was another very interesting part that came out of the Science Day.
Did we get all Lenny's questions answered?
ICD-10, you said.
Oh, the ICD. Yeah, let me just clarify what we meant by that. After the first meeting that I was at of this committee, at the very, very end, there was a discussion about the ICD-9 and the ICD-10. And so what we did was we tried to, we met with the people that are charged with doing this coding to try to understand what it is. It's not in our purview to be doing the coding. So there is, in the ICD-9 clinical modification is the system that's being used now. The ICD-10 will be implemented at a later date, and there is a CFS in there, a CFS code that's under the symptoms chapter. There's also a separate post-infectious fatigue, which is under the neurologic chapter.
I just wondered that you mentioned the two different branches, the CFS working group and the retrovirology group. Is there a dialogue that's being established, or like regular conferences that are going to be planned between these two groups? And are there samples from the Wichita group or the Kansas group that are going to be tested when the testing becomes available for XMRV? Are there plans for that?
I'll answer the first part, and maybe Dr. Unger can answer the second part. Since the first publication in Science emerged, we have had almost, I guess, weekly or bi-weekly meetings, face-to-face meetings with the blood and tissue group, the retrovirology group, and the CFS group all together to discuss plans to move forward, what testing is being done, what testing needs to be done, who needs to be involved, et cetera. So yes, at CDC we've been actively engaged together frequently and continue to do so during this process. So Beth, if you could take that second part.
The question was specifically whether the Wichita samples would be tested, and they actually were part of the first study. And they are significantly depleted, and whether there'll be enough to be tested in a new round of testing is, we'll have to see. One of our goals is to figure out the best way to make additional samples available, and for that, we definitely need to wait until the optimal way of sample collection and processing is determined, because our processing, we were very careful to process immediately, within the first day of receipt, and perhaps that wasn't the best way for this particular virus, even though that's the standard for sample handling in general.